Okay, so this is going to be the first video that gets into actually developing our first VR Unity game. And we're going to just start with some really basic stuff. So let's go ahead and begin by creating a new project. So inside of Unity Hub, go ahead and open that, and we're going to come up to New Project and click on that. Make sure to check if you have multiple versions of Unity that you are in fact using the latest or earliest version. You should only have one, but if over time you collect more, make sure you're using the newest version. And then we're going to come down and we're going to do the 3D URP. Okay, you may have to download that. All right. All right, and for project name, let's just do my first VR project. And at this point, you should see the Unity game engine trying to open up and building some different packages. And that may take just a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here while that does that. Okay, so after maybe a minute or two, you should be into the Unity game engine and you should probably be seeing sort of the default layout. There's a lot of different options here. One option that I think kind of works well when building this stuff, that's a little better maybe than the default, is to come over to the tall layout. Which is kind of a little bit of a dramatic shift from what the default is, but that I think gives you a little more visibility of the actual environment that you're going to be building in. The other thing you can do is you can drag the game window tab down, and that's kind of nice, in particular when you're building things, so that you can, see the camera view as it's currently in your scene. So um, right now the camera is looking off into the distance, but you can see that, with some basic kind of adjustments, you can get the camera to, move in different ways. You can see that changing the field of view um, in the scene below. So, all right, so let's continue. So the first thing we want to do is to create a new scene in our game. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. But the primary way of doing that is to come over here to this plus button, click on that. You'll see this large list of different options. What we are looking for is a scene. So we'll create a new scene. All right, and it shows up down here in your assets. And you can name this, whatever you want. When you're building your actual projects, you might, call it the name of your project. But for this time, for this tutorial, let's go ahead and just call it um, first VR scene. All right. All right, so once you have the scene created, just a little housekeeping, you typically want to make sure that you're organizing your assets. This is going to be important, particularly as your game gets bigger. If you just leave everything in this generic assets folder, it will grow and grow and grow, and then you won't be able to find things easily. So go ahead and just click and drag this into the scenes folder. And so now when you go into the scenes folder, you should see the default sample scene that was already here and your first VR scene that you just created. And then you can obviously go back and forth between the different files in a couple different ways there. All right, so now what we want to do is actually go into the scene we just created. So you can see up here in the hierarchy, you can always tell what scene you're in by coming up here and looking. Right now we're technically in the sample scene. And what we want to do now, though, is to go back into that scenes folder and we want to switch to our scene that we just created. So go ahead and double click on that. Um, You may get a warning like scenes have been modified. Do you want to save changes? Um, go ahead and just hit save for now. All right, and so now you can see up at the top here that the scene has changed now to the first VR scene, and some of the different objects that were originally in there have gone away. So now we just have the default main camera and directional light. All right, so we are now ready to start doing some basic development of our first VR game. The first thing that we need to do is to create a place for our scene. We need to add like ground and other objects. So let's go ahead and we're going to add a plane to the environment to represent the ground. So let's go ahead and pretty much anywhere in the scene, in the hierarchy up here, you can hit right click on your mouse. Alternatively, you can come back down here to the project. Um, to try and add new objects. And so let's go ahead and just right click. That's usually the fastest, easiest because it gives you sort of this truncated list of kind of typical game objects that you're going to mess with. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down to 3D object and we're going to pick a plane, which, ironically is a 2D object, but regardless here. So let's call that plane and it automatically puts you in a mode where you can rename it. Let's go ahead and just call it ground and then hit enter. And now you can see we have a plane object, and you can see down here in your camera view that that object has now, um, you know, shown up. You can rotate it, you can do some other things, you can translate it. The other thing you'll notice is if you come over to the inspector window, there's a lot of different settings associated with this ground plane that we just created. So you can see I was playing around with the rotation, and that rotation has now shown up here. So let's put that back to 0. If we come over to our camera view, again, you can kind of see that as I shift the camera view, you can see the plane changing its orientation. You can see the different angle here. So let's put the camera back to 0, 0, 0. All right. So now that we have a plane, we may want to just sort of scale this up so that we have plenty of space for our VR environment. Um, Obviously, you don't need to mess with the Z value because it's a plane. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and up the plane size to 10 in each direction. Oh, sorry. Y is our up value, so Z is our ground plane value. All right. And so now you can see we have a nice expansive ground plane. Something to keep in mind in Unity, all of the values that we are using are in Unity units, which are actually equivalent to a meter. So when you see 1 in like the scale, the initial plane that you've dropped is actually 1 meter by 1 meter in the game environment. So we've actually just extended this to 10 meters. That's actually probably a little big, if you were doing a scene in a small room, for example. Most rooms are about 8 to 10 feet wide, and maybe about, 12 to 15 feet deep. Um, I can't think off the top of my head what that is in meters, but that's probably like closer to maybe like 5 meters um, in any given direction. I forget my conversion rates, so don't quote me on that. But again, you just want to make sure that you have a plane that is sufficiently big to support the game environment that you're trying to build for. So if you're building a really big, expansive outdoor world, you're going to want to make that plane, substantially large. If you're building something that's more interior based, then you're going to want to keep it to a little bit smaller value. But just pick something that's big enough so that you can easily look around and see. Okay, so maybe one of the next things we want to do is to just quickly update the color on this plane. The way we do that is to create a new material. So let's go ahead and do that. So in your assets folder, make sure you're in there and go ahead and hit create. And then we want to find material. All right, here that is. And now we have a new material. We're going to call this our ground material. All right, and then we're going to change the color. So just for fun, pick whatever color you'd like. I am going to pick black. And this will just create some contrast between the sky and the sort of default sort of ground environment that you see in Unity. You can pick whatever color you want. Maybe you want to pick green because maybe you want it to look a little bit like grass. So pick maybe a nice dark green color here. Um, and then you can apply it to the plane. And the way you do that is you can simply just drag it over to your scene and boom, there you go. So now we have a nice green ground plane out here. Um, all right, let's keep going. Okay, so now that we have a environment built, let's go ahead and set up the XR or in this case VR settings um, so that we can actually make the scene do something. So if we were to hit play right now, um, you'd see down in the game window that nothing happens, right? There's nothing going on. If you move your headset around, the camera just stays still. So what we need to do is we actually need to um, set up the environment to actually be usable for VR. So the way we do that is we hit edit and then we come down to project settings. Click on that. Your project settings window should open up. And what we want to do is we want to come all the way down here to XR plugin management. So extended reality plugin management. And we need to go ahead and install that. This may take a couple of minutes. All right, we'll give it a second here. You can see it's just adding a bunch of different things to our packages. And there we go. Now we can see that we have some different settings available to us and some different things showed up into our assets folder. We now have an XR folder. All right, so um, one interesting fact is you have a lot of different options in terms of your plugin providers. Let's say you didn't even have a headset, but you wanted to still develop a VR application. So this would be good after class when maybe you don't have access to a headset anymore if you wanted to keep working. There is a mock HMD. I haven't used that before because I actually have my headset, but as far as I know, it does let you help you sort of simulate having a headset. That way you could continue to build a game and see that it actually would work inside of a headset. So let's keep configuring our settings. Okay, so a couple of different things that we want to configure here. You might be inclined to click on the Oculus button here as your primary mode for the XR. Um, But for these setup tutorials, we're actually going to use the OpenXR plugin. We may come back in later tutorials and turn this on, but OpenXR is kind of nice because if you use this as your sort of primary setting, it will actually mean your game will run on things including the Oculus. So let's say you had access to a Vive Pro or some other type of, Facebook VR headset. They've made a couple. By using OpenXR, this actually supports multiple platforms. And so you can go ahead and click on that, and it will pull in the OpenXR packages. And this is for our desktop settings. So this will only work right now in this setting for our laptop or desktops when we have the headset connected via the cable. We'll also turn on the OpenXR package for Android after it finishes loading up here so that we can play untethered from the computer. So we'll go ahead and click on that one as well. It takes a few seconds for these to download and load. Let's see, it looks like it's almost done. Let me think. Do we want to do that? Yeah, go ahead and hit yes to this. This will change some back-end settings on the input system, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the tutorial. And go ahead and hit save. It's going to cause your project to restart. May take a minute for it to load back up. Okay, so after long and arduous waiting for the settings and everything to apply and load the application back up, we should be back to our game environment, and we should see that the OpenXR stuff is working. You may see this little icon here. This is just letting you know that there are still some settings we're going to need to update or change. We'll get to that as we move along. Let's also go into the Android settings, and let's apply the OpenXR setting as well in there. Again, some of you are going to have computers that can run with the Oculus tethered, assuming you have kind of a gaming laptop with a decent enough graphics card. My guess is the vast majority of you will probably need to do the Android build, and we'll cover that as we go along. All right, cool. So let's continue. Okay, so now that you have the OpenXR settings turned on for both Android and PC, you'll see that there is also now an OpenXR set of settings just down here underneath of the XR plugin management. And now the next thing we want to do is set up our interaction profiles. You can see this setting here. And we're going to go ahead and set that up so that it works for the Oculus. All right, so we need to go ahead and add the profile for the Oculus. So go ahead and hit the plus sign. One thing to keep in mind is if you are trying to develop your game to work on more than one type of headset or device, you'll want to add, probably almost all of these. But for our cases, we're just going to add the Oculus Touch controller profile. And is there anything else we want to add? No, I think we just want to add the touch controller profile. So make sure you've added that in here for the PC. Also come over here to Android because you need to do that for each of them. All right. Cool. Excellent. So I think we are good there. I can't remember, do we need to add the Quest support? We'll come back to that. We may need to add that. I need to double check. Okay, so at this point, the VR headset should work when you hit the play button. So make sure your headset's turned on and go ahead and hit the play button. And you may end up getting a bunch of different prompts inside the headset regarding like the USB connection and a bunch of other things. We're going to say yes to all of those things. It may take you a second or two, and you may have to hit play in the Unity game engine again. Again, the play button's up here. This is used for debugging. And so you may have to click that a couple of different times on and off as you go through the different settings inside your headset. Some of you will probably likely need to reset your Guardian system so that, since you're in a new environment, being in the classroom, you'll probably need to do that. If you're at home, you'll probably need to do that just to make sure that your Guardian is set up for the current environment that you're in. So it may take you a couple different steps. It may be slightly different than what we're doing here. But notionally, you should be able to get through all of those things to the point where when you hit the play button, and look inside your headset, you should now be seeing the sky and whatever color ground that you set for yourself. But when you look around, the headset does not appear to be moving, right? So now what we need to do is we need to add a component to our main camera. So let's come over here to main camera, click on that, and we're going to come down into our inspector window to add component. And now what we want to look for in the search is we're going to type in track pose driver. And so we want the track pose driver added to our main camera. And what you can see here on the track pose driver is a bunch of different settings. So right now it says it's a generic XR device, so that would be our headset. So it's telling the main camera to follow the pose of our headset. It says to follow it from the center eye. there's probably different ones you can choose for different reasons, depending on the type of headset you're using. Like if you were using an AR headset that only had a single display in the right or left eye, you might want to switch those settings. But for VR, I think it automatically defaults for the center eye, which makes sense. Um, and then the tracking type, we're going to do rotation and position. So that means if you move forward, backwards, left, right, that the headset should still be tracking in that. And then obviously the rotation of your head, moving your head up, down, left, right should work. And then update type, let's see, update before and after the render. Yep, that's good. I don't think we need relative transform. Let's see, none. All right, so I think that should now work. So let's give it a try. All right, so I'm hitting play. Takes a second. All right, now you can see that as I move the headset around, you can see that the camera position is actually updating. If I move forward, back, left, or right, you can see the camera is translating. It may be a little difficult to see, so one thing you can do just to kind of maybe help is we could throw like another object in the scene, like a cube, for example. So we could put that out here. And now when we play it, we should see a cube. Well, I think we are in the center of the cube. So let's move the cube. There we go. Cool. All right, now I can see that there is a floating cube, and when I move my head around, it comes into and out of the view. If I move closer to it, it gets bigger and smaller, right? So perfect. All right, so if we just left it at that, you would have already accomplished, building your first VR application. Obviously, there's a lot more that we need to do in terms of building interactions and things that are meaningful to do. But at a basics sort of level, you could, in theory, just strap in some 3D models of, say, some CAD or something you've been working on, and you could walk around the device and do it that way. Um, so one of the things we'll do next real quick is to see if we can run this in the non-tethered mode. I won't be able to display that on my screen, obviously, because what we'll be doing is actually building it directly to the headset. But I will record a separate video of maybe what that experience looks like. It should look basically the same as this. But let's go ahead and see if we can go through that settings change to automatically build it for Android and then be able to experience it directly on the headset. Okay, for those of you that don't have a super powerful computer and need to actually just load the application directly to your device in order to see that it's working, we need to go ahead and go into File. We need to go into Build Settings, and this is where you can control or manage all of your build settings for actually deploying the application, whether you're building an actual PC executable or an executable APK for Android. One of the things we definitely need to do is add our open scene. More than likely what you'll see in here is just scene/sample scene. Come in here to add open scenes, and it should suddenly pop this up. You're going to uncheck scene sample and then check scene first VR scene, because this is going to tell the compiler which actual scene you want to build to the application. So once you have that set, then let's come down here to the platform, and we're going to go ahead and switch to Android. All right. And again, some of your settings may be a little different than mine. I've gone through this before. If your headset is connected properly and you have all your settings and everything configured appropriately, then you should be able to come down here to Run Device, and instead of Default Device, you should be able to select the Oculus Quest. So go ahead and switch to that, and then we're going to go ahead and switch platform. Click on that. may take a few minutes for this to kind of go through its different processes and things that it's doing. All right, you may get some errors like this that say cannot build. So once you have done that, we are going to double check that our player settings are set up correctly. So right now, we're going to go into player settings over here, click on that, and it should take you automatically into your Android settings. What you're going to need to do in addition here is to fill out some stuff. So at the very top of the screen, you see company name. I just used my UMass underscore my first initial and last name. Product name should already be populated for you. And so we're going to do that. Once you have the company name filled out, we're going to scroll down a little ways. And you'll see a setting under identification, override default package name. Uncheck that. We want to uncheck that box, and then it will automatically create a package name for you based on your company name and your product name. And a version number. Don't mess with any of that stuff, and you should be good to go. Okay, couple other settings we need to mess with while we're down here. We need to change the minimum API level from Android Lollipop, which is API level 22, to Android 10, API level 29. This is what the Quest and Quest 2 use as their primary operating system. The next thing that we need to do so that things work properly is we need to change the scripting backend. So when you're running on PC and doing that, the scripting backend can be mono, but Android doesn't like mono, and we need to switch to IL2CPP. Don't ask me what that stands for. And then the other thing we need to do is to change the processor type. So the target architecture is currently set to ARM version 7. We need to go ahead and check ARM 64. You probably can leave both of these checked. I don't think that that'll matter. And in terms of the player settings, at least for Android, you should be fine. I think on PC you can leave that mono. Yeah. So I think, yeah, let's go ahead and uncheck ARM 7. We don't really need that. So, whoops, where'd it go? Here we are. Yeah, so go ahead and uncheck ARM 7. We're just going to leave it at ARM 64. And other than that, I think we should pretty much be good. One other thing to check would be the target API level. Make sure that's set to automatic. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is, but just double check that. Okay, so I think we have all the settings configured now. Let's go ahead and close out our player settings, and you should now be back over to the build settings. Go ahead and hit build, and you'll need to pick a file name. So I've already typed in my first project. You can call it whatever you want, but you know, typically naming it after your project file name is the best route. So go ahead and type that in if it's not already filled out, and then go ahead and hit save. Sure, go ahead and hit save again. All right, now it should be trying to build, and hopefully if it goes correctly, then you should see no console errors. Reminder, your little console window may be down here. If for some reason you're not seeing it, it'll automatically pop up if there are errors, and then you can start to kind of troubleshoot those. Sometimes when you're building these applications, you won't get an actual error which shows up in red. You'll just get some warnings that'll show up in yellow, and a lot of times you can ignore those because sometimes those are just some package-related issues. All right, let's let this finish out building here. It may take a few seconds. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead. Okay, so we are ready to try and build and run this. I think we do need to actually update some build settings that we need to change in our project settings. So let's go back in here to player settings. My guess is if you built and ran the application without doing this, that what ended up starting in your headset was like a 2D display version of your game. And that's not what we want. We need it to actually open in a virtual reality setting. So let's come back to OpenXR settings in the XR plugin management and come down here and click on the Oculus Quest support. So we did need that setting. And so what this will do is it'll automatically tell Oculus Quest to load up the game as a VR game as opposed to some sort of like a 2D game. So we do need to have that checked. Cool. Then what you're going to do is you're going to hit build and run. And when you do that, it will go through its build process. Again, provided you have everything connected up properly, once you hit build and run, it will start to build the application and then it will run it inside your headset. Um, so you'll put on your headset, and when it's done building, you should be transported into your world, and you should be able to look around and see the cube still in there. And be sure to have your cube positioned, relatively, close, but not directly in the 0, 0 location. You should probably set it to like, maybe about -2 meters um, away and 2 meters in front of you. So play around with that to make sure that the cube is not right centered where you are, because the game will start you in the center position of the screen because our main camera ends up getting centered to the world. Um, that should be it, and you should have a working application in Android. Now, if you want to replay your game without necessarily being connected to the computer, you'll have to go through a process of accessing that application from the headset, and I will, give you some instructions on how to do that, and maybe even try and make a video to show you directly how that works. Okay, so great job, and we will have a separate video that starts to get into the actual interaction piece. So we will need to obviously build out some things in order for us to use the hand controllers or the hand tracking, and also to sort of bring things like visualizations of the controllers in your hands into the scene. So we'll have a separate video for that. Great job, and if you have any questions or you have trouble getting this to work, just give me an email or talk to me directly in class, and we will go from there. Thanks again.